All right, welcome to the Justin Ledger Show. I am Justin Ledger, and we're back with another episode. It's been quite a while since we had an episode of this podcast, but I'm happy to be back. Happy to interview Phil Perry today, Patriots insider for NBC Sports Boston, my coworker at NBC Sports Boston for the last 8 years, which is crazy to say. But I've seen Phil blossom from kind of where I started, desk editor, editing copy all day, crazy hours, 6 to 2 a.m. most of the time, 5 days a week, to turning into sort of just a do it all for NBC Sports Boston when it comes to the Patriots. He's on TV what seems like all day, every day. He podcasts. He's writing still constantly, and he's a great writer. I know that firsthand from editing his stuff. So just very excited to talk to him about his come up in sports media. We do get into the mess that is the New England Patriots. We talk about their horrific loss to the Jaguars and how it's kind of devolved into this Drake Maye calling out players in the media, calling them soft, and then backtracking, saying he's not calling them soft, but they're playing soft. You have players calling each other out in the media, sort of for egos, as they call it, thinking too highly of themselves. You have off the field stuff. Christian Barmore getting into it with police after a traffic stop. You have Jabril Peppers, who's a captain, getting in trouble for what seems like domestic violence, alleged domestic violence. So just not great all around in Foxboro right now. And as they sit here at 1-6, it's like how we knew it was going to be bad, but we didn't know it was going to be this bad, this dysfunctional in year one in this new Patriots regime. Maybe we should have known, but we didn't. The one bright spot is Drake Maye, so we will get into him, the rookie quarterback, and how this team can build around him and sustain success going forward, which seems like a lot to ask for. But nonetheless, we will get into it. So I'm very excited to share this interview with Phil Perry. I hope you enjoy it. Subscribe. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube. Follow on Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. We will have more interviews in the future for you. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, very happy to welcome on Patriots insider Phil Perry, my coworker at NBC Sports Boston, Phil Perry. Phil, how's it going? Thanks for coming on.
Everything's great, Justin. Thanks so much for having me. I'm psyched to be here with you, bud.
Yeah, psyched to have you. I do want to talk a little bit about, before we get into the mess that is the New England Patriots, about just your kind of come up to where you are now in sports media. I always find it interesting, people's different paths to get there. So briefly, take me through what it took for you to rise, sort of kind of the position that I started in, which is desk editor for NBC Sports Boston, just kind of editing copy all day and maybe writing a story here and there, to being on TV, to being on radio, to podcasting, all of that good stuff.
Boy, it was such a great place for me to really be at that point in my career. I had come from the newspaper world, Justin. I'm sort of one of the last of the Mohegans, I guess, when it comes to that. In terms of doing the daily grind in the high school sports and college sports a little bit, but that was sort of the big time when I got to do that. I was up in New Hampshire doing that for about a year out of college, and then at the time it was Comcast Sportsnet New England had
One of
just
its many
started its
names.
website. Yes, exactly. And uh, our friend Art Martone, the late great Art Martone, needed some help editing the website, and so was so lucky and blessed to be introduced to him, and also lucky, quite frankly, that he was pretty desperate for some help
Yeah,
because they, that you know how it is. It's late nights. It's whenever the games are. Stuff's
exactly.
coming in, and the site. Somebody's got to update the site, and so that was my job. I was the night guy. For from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. was my shift,
Yep.
5 nights a week, and it was great. It was great, and I very much just wanted to be the guy to kind of keep his head down. And for me, it was a blast because, you know, at the time, Tom Curran, Sean McAdam, covering the Red Sox. These guys were guys that I read growing up. These were like big names as far as um, inspirational voices for me. So to be able to work closely with them and edit their stories and sometimes suggest changes here and there, and they were always so great and so open to that sort of stuff. They gave me a lot of um, uh, runway in terms of you know hey, that's his job, and they were happy to have somebody to do it. And so the same way we are with everybody's on the desk now, yourself included, like we would be so lost without you guys. So it was such a great place for me to start. And again, sort of right place, right time to get that job, and then right place, right time to start covering the team. So I was working at night. During the day I didn't have kids. I wasn't married. I was sort of footloose, fancy free. So during the day, I had a part time job for the Boston Globe, doing high school stuff for them. So I'd go to a practice or maybe go to a game every once in a while. But a lot of times it was even just over the phone, and it wasn't really covering games necessarily. Although I did that a little bit, it was more writing features. Um, but anyway, I remember talking to Curran about that stuff that I was doing during the day, and Curran had taken a little bit of a liking to me because we actually worked at the same daily paper in Claremont, New Hampshire,
Oh wow.
about 20 years apart. We
Yeah.
sat at the same desk apparently and everything.
No way.
Uh, I remember, one of my coworkers at the Eagle Times in Claremont telling me exactly that. Hey, Tom, that guy Tom Curran who covers the Patriots. Yeah, he used to sit right in that seat that you're sitting in right now, which was cool to me. I didn't know him at all. So then for us to eventually you know get together and become as close as we have become is awesome. So anyway, I think he sort of put that in the back of his mind, like, wow, this guy was willing to go to New Hampshire to write high school stuff, and senior citizen sports and donkey basketball and all the random stuff that I was covering up there, and he's working during the day before he comes to his job at night. So eventually what happened, and it didn't happen fast. I started at Comcast Sportsnet in 2010. But by 2014, they needed help on the beat, and so Karin knew that I was doing all this other stuff. I had bothered Art to the point where he let me on my day off. He told me, because I was technically part time. He told me, "Hey, we can't pay you, but if you really want to go down to Patriots practice on Fridays, you can go to the press conference. You can go to the practice, see who's out there, who's not. The attendance stuff that we all do in the beat now, and go to the locker room." And so that was great. It was once a week, and I could go and be inside Gillette Stadium and ask Bill Belichick a question at the podium, and it took me probably a few weeks before I felt comfortable doing that, um, but eventually I did, and every week I was in there, and I had stuff ready to go, and that was like my time to shine. So I think those experiences sort of added up, and eventually in 2014 they said, okay, Tom has so much other stuff going on. He said quick slants, and he's on TV every night, and we wanted to have a greater presence on the beat, I think, and so that's when uh, Tom was, he see me sitting there probably at 10 o'clock at night one night. He's like, can we get Phil down there? Like, Phil, we need somebody on the beat. Can we get him? Like, what do we think? So again, right place, right time. Very lucky to be where I was when I was. But that's sort of how I ended up in the role that I'm in now. It's grown and it's become more TV than writing and things like that. All the different responsibilities have definitely changed over time. But that was sort of how I landed on the Patriots beat.
Did you experience any imposter syndrome, I guess you could call it, along the way? Like, wow, like these are people that I've, listened to, watched, read for years, and now they're my colleagues. Like, did you experience that?
Oh, are you kidding? Every day,
Yeah.
every day. And like Mike Reese is in there again. Another guy I had read forever. Steve Buckley, Dan Shaughnessy. All these guys. Like I'm sitting in press conferences with these
Right.
people, or I'm watching them. Ron Borges. I'm in the locker room. I'm watching these guys work the locker room after a game. When I started going to the games and seeing how that went, and my head was like spinning. And it's not in a fanboy kind of way, but it's like, what am I doing here? Like, I don't, I, I, I didn't really even study journalism in college, Justin. They didn't have it when I was in school. But I did work for the school paper, and so that gave me some reps that I felt pretty confident doing certain things. But seeing those people that are obviously um, in very different spots in their career and very well-known names and very accomplished people and excellent reporters and excellent writers and people that I admired, um, to be working alongside them to a degree and competing with them a lot of times,
Right.
or feeling like I should be at least. Hey, I'm here. I'm sort of carrying the NBC flag or the Comcast flag or whatever it was at the time. I got to make sure we're well represented here. The
Yeah.
Globe might show up on a Wednesday and have 5 people in a press conference, and and there was some it was that sort of made it fun too. There might be days where it was me and Tom, or me and Tom and Mike Giardi. We spent a lot of time together at Gillette together, and it was like, uh, we felt like we were doing a good job if we could really make a story our own, and have it not be the Globes or have it not be ESPN's. So imposter syndrome, even to this day, um, you know, seeing some of the people that I see league wide, that I've read for a long time. Whether it's having a conversation with Judy Batista from NFL Network, who I respect tremendously, to even talking to people that I've gotten to talk to in my job, and it's very different. Again, you're not being a fan, but I did grow up here, and I did grow up a Patriots fan, and so 14-year-old me having an opportunity to talk to Robert Kraft and have a conversation with Robert Kraft, that would have like kind of blown my mind,
Yeah.
20 some odd years ago.
Right.
And now it's not that I'm talking to him every day, don't get me wrong, but it's not um completely mind blowing the way that it probably was the first time it happened. And so that imposter syndrome thing is always a thing, and I think in some ways it's a good thing.
Yeah.
I think it kind of keeps you, it gives you good perspective, and it sort of keeps you on edge. You don't want it to drive you into a hole and really cause you to get into a place where you feel like you can't do the job because you don't belong there. But I think it does push you a little bit um, to make you feel as though you do belong.
Right.
And so I'm thankful for those feelings that I've had and that I still have.
And not only did you get to cover the Patriots alongside, like you said, a bunch of people that you read and watched growing up, you also got to cover the Brady Belichick era, which is just incredible in itself. But now you're covering a team that is very much not like that era. What has that been like, making that switch from a dynasty, a team with so much winning pedigree, to a team that is just kind of in a mess for the past what it's been 4 years?
Yeah, it's what's interesting, Just, is the approach for me really doesn't change.
Yeah.
What we're trying to do is find stories that people are going to find interesting, that people are going to want to read about, understand a little bit more about, if topics that they may want to learn about because of what they see on Sundays, or
Yeah.
because of what they hear from the coaches or from the players, or what they see on social media. So, you know, my approach remains the same. It's just the stories themselves are different, obviously, right? So when things are going great,
Right.
people want to know why, and those tend to be really well received stories, and those make people happy because things are going well. And so if you can talk to Bill Belichick about, you know, boy, how his sort of his risk taking approach as a head coach, and when they do something a little odd or a little sideways and it works, why was he able to do that? What is it about his background that caused him to be willing to take that chance when he took it? That story reads one way in 2014, and I wrote something similar to that in the early 2015 season. I had a long conversation with him about Wayne Harden, who's this great coach at Navy, who really taught him that it is not only okay, but it's important, to be able to take risks when other people think you're crazy. But that story would read much differently just in 2022, right? When he hires Matt Patricia or Joe Judge to be in positions that nobody thinks they should be in. So
Right.
it's almost like the same kind of mindset, but because the way things are going, it's a very different story. So, um, those are the kinds of things that we're still pursuing. Obviously, the way in which I guess we acquire our information, um, the way we handle press conferences, the way we handle the locker room has changed since Bill has gone, obviously. And Gerard Mayo and the way that this regime wants to do things is very different. So that's been different in terms of like how the environment that we're working in changes our jobs. But in terms of that, my actual approach, like I'm going to a press conference a little bit later this morning. I'm still doing the same thing. I'm trying to think about, what do fans care about? What do they want asked of the head coach? And I take that responsibility seriously. And we did it at the tail end. We did it at the height of Bill Belichick, and we did it at the tail end of Bill Belichick. And I always brought the same approach, and the answers from Bill changed as the team got worse because he wasn't happy and he didn't want to have to answer questions that I think a lot of fans had for him at the time. But it was important for me to ask a lot of those questions because, again, that's sort of how I view my job. I won't always know. It's not like I'm polling people on Twitter. Hey, what should I ask Bill Belichick today?
Right.
But we do, I try to put myself in my shoes as somebody who was a Patriots fan, as somebody who is related to a lot of Patriots fans still, whose best
Yep.
friends are still Patriots fans. I know what they care about. And so asking the questions to get them the answers they want is sort of how I'm approaching my job, whether the team is good or bad.
Well, it's been a fun last couple weeks of Patriots football. We have some interesting times in Foxboro, specifically right now after what we just witnessed on Sunday. Uh, what is going on in that locker room? You have players calling each other out. You have social media posts. You have Mayo calling the team soft and then saying he's not calling the team soft. He's just saying they're playing soft. What is going on in that locker room? Give me your perspective of just like what is happening down there.
They're swimming upstream. They are lost. I think it's safe to say. It doesn't mean they can't be found, and that they can't find their way at some point this year. But they don't know how to win, and that to me is going to be really hard for them to eventually figure out because they had an opportunity. I think while they were slowly turning over from those championship winning teams to, okay, the Cam Newton year, then the Mac Jones years, you did still have players who understood what championship football was. And I'm not sure the how to win factor, whatever that secret sauce is, was passed down the way that Bill Belichick at the time, Robert Kraft certainly, um, other player leaders that still are in the locker room, or at least on the team. Guys like David Andrews, Dietrich Wise, guys that were on this team the last time they won a Super Bowl in 2018. Joe Cardona, throw him in there. Like, John Jones, like they've got championship level players here who have seen it. But it just feels like those types of players are fewer and farther between than ever before. And teaching a team how to win, I think, requires maybe more voices than what they have right now. It obviously requires more talent too. And so when you just have this perfect storm of bad team, not a ton of experience, a lot of lost leadership, I think that's maybe one of the under the radar stories with this team, Justin, because you lost Juwan Bentley, because you lost David Andrews.
Yep.
Jabril Peppers obviously is away from the team, but before his recent, alleged incident, a lot of players would have pointed to him as the team who's a captain this year. You know, Missing those individuals and their voices has been really key during this slide as well. So it's not one thing, and then the coach. You have to talk about the coach, right? It's his first year. He doesn't have a lot of talent. It's really a bad spot for him, and this was not the plan. I think the Patriots hoped that the team was in much better shape when Bill Belichick left and Drake Maye took over, and who knows what it would have looked like if the ship had been righted prior to his being hired. But it's a lot right now for a guy who has no experience in this spot, and so he's learning on the fly, which he'll readily admit to you. The question is, as you're learning on the fly, can you get the players bought in what is a really a sort of looking like a lost season, make them feel like it's not a lost season, and try to build something so that by the end of this year you can look at it and say, boy, Remember back in September and October, that was brutal. But we figured ourselves out. We know who we are now, and that's who we're going to be next year. And we're going to add some talent to this thing. And you watch it. That's the most you can hope for right now when it comes to the culture and just where the locker room is at.
Well, they do have Drake Maye, who has impressed so far. It's only been a couple games, but still, I think I can speak for most Pats fan, like Patriots fans, Patriots media, when I say like he's been impressive. Now, building around him, I mean, we don't want another Mac Jones situation where you just don't build around the guy and like this is all for nothing. So when the off season comes, or actually even before the off season, the trade deadline's coming up. So put yourself in Elliott Wolf's shoes here. What would you do to build around Drake Maye and kind of expedite that process of being a competitive team?
So this year's trade deadline is really interesting to me. I think if there were going to be a number of talented receivers that were about to hit free agency next offseason, I would be looking to buy, quite frankly, Justin, which I know sounds crazy, but to me, with Drake Maye on his rookie deal, and he has been impressive, he's impressed even me, and I called him, the best quarterback prospect in this draft before he was drafted. I just think between the size and all the physical traits and the makeup that he brings to the table as somebody who struggled a little bit because his situation wasn't great in college. I think you're seeing that play out right now. Why he's such a good fit for the Patriots. We'll see if he's ever better than Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels looks like if he can stay healthy, going to be runaway favorite for the rookie of the year. But I think they got their guy right. So good for them. They're lucky he was there, quite frankly, at 3.
Right.
And they needed a quarterback and a quarterback loaded draft this year. It's not looking so hot. So congratulations to them. But you know, I think you do have to get aggressive and try to make the most of him on this rookie deal. And if you have a good quarterback, those guys are getting extensions after year 3, Justin. So you might be paying him very real dollars in very short order here. So what can you do to make your team as strong as it can be in the short term? And again, if there were the names that, if there were names that I think, were on bad teams and that were about to be free agents, especially a receiver, maybe tackle too, although those guys change teams even less frequently than receivers do, then I would be looking to buy. I don't think that guy's going to be there at this deadline. So what do? Do you sell? I think the only position you might be able to sell off a part or two is maybe receiver.
Yeah.
And you might be the only guys that I think teams might want are the guys that you want, right?
Right.
Like it's Kendrick Bourne. It's maybe Kayshon Boutte who looks like he's showing some things
Yeah.
now. And even if you deal them, what are you getting back in return? It's probably not a ton. So I I wouldn't be. I'm not sure how active I would be at this deadline because I just would be so reluctant to move a piece that could help Drake Maye at the tail end of his rookie year. But then next off season, I think you got to pursue all avenues. Like if there's okay, so say you draft your tackle at the top of the draft. If there's an avenue to pull off sort of like a Tyreek Hill trade to get your number one receiver that you haven't been able to get in free agency because you haven't been able to encourage him. Hey, best case scenario for the Patriots, somebody watches Drake Maye this year and says, I want to play with that guy. I don't care how much of a mess it is there. If they're willing to pay me, that guy looks like a stud. Like I'll go there. That would be great for them in free agency, but it might have to be a trade and a big swing of a trade. Like that Tyreek Hill deal. There's a bunch of names that are coming up. DK Metcalf, Jamar Chase. There's 4 or 5 others that are huge, legit number ones who not this offseason, but next offseason are scheduled to be free agents. So that to me is probably how I would play it right now, Justin, is try to find your tackle in the draft and then try to make a big splash soon thereafter to get a receiver. And then you see what you have from there. But I think those 2 pieces alone could make a big difference in terms of the record next year.
Do you have one last question? I know we're running low on time. You've got some press conferences to go to this morning. I know that. But one last question I have for you is 3 years from now, right? Is Drake Maye still the quarterback? Is Gerard Mayo still the head coach? What situation are we dealing with in Foxboro? Is it still a mess? Or are we starting to put the pieces together? Is it starting to look like a perennial contender?
Boy, it's so let's start with the quarterback because I do think it starts there.
Yeah.
It's still a player's game. What Bill Belichick always used to tell us, and Gerard Mayo, and for all the differences that I know those 2 guys have, in terms of how they comport themselves. They do believe in a lot of the same thing. I mean, Mayo's a Belichick guy. That's how he learned pro football. So he believes toughness is running the ball, stopping the run, and covering kicks, same way Bill Belichick does. He believes it's a player's game, the same way players lose games, coaches win them. You've heard Gerard Mayo say that, as Bill Belichick has said it for years and years and years. So start with the quarterback. That's the most important piece. Number one, with a bullet. And I think he's here not only for the next 3 years, but I think he's going to be here for the next 8+. Like I think he's that good, and I think he's going to be their franchise guy, and I think he's perfect for this franchise as they sort of find their way. So they definitely need to surround him with more talent, but I think he's only getting better. He just turned 22. He's already shown, to me, significant improvement since we saw him in the spring. And I give a lot of credit to Alex Van Pelt, by the way, for that. Like I think coaching staff hasn't done a lot right this year. I would say one thing they've done pretty well is they've developed that quarterback, or it looks that way at least. So that's number one. He's here. Mayo, he's going to get 2 years, in my opinion, at least, Justin. I don't think Robert Kraft is going to be willing to, if he feels like it was a mistake, admit that mistake, especially after year one, especially after firing Bill Belichick.
Right.
Like that it would be such a hit to his reputation, his credibility, I think, in some ways, that he's not going to be willing to acknowledge that. And I don't think he should, quite frankly. I think you have to give new staff, they're all like, what did you think was going to happen? Now, some of the stuff that has happened with this team is beyond the pale, and it shouldn't happen. I'm not sure you blame the coach for Christian Barmore, getting into it with Rhode Island police, or Jabril Peppers allegedly committing a heinous act at home, again, allegedly, and you could say, well, that's the sign of a dysfunctional team and a team that's off the rails, and I get that, but for me, we've seen dysfunctional stuff of the highest order with Bill Belichick, and you don't put that on Bill Belichick either, really. If you see some of the things that we saw over the course of 20 years. So I think you have to give them time. You have to let them try to get the roster right, but they didn't do enough this offseason. Next offseason is really the big one. That, to me, is the test. And then you see how it goes through year two. And then if you want to make a change after that, because it's just not going in the right direction, you can't stand it anymore, you can't live with it, then that seems more reasonable to me than firing a guy who's in his first year as head coach when you knew it was going to be bad, with a bad roster, because the team's performing poorly. Like, there's a lot of other stuff that's going on there. And so maybe, I'll be proven wrong by the end of this season, and his patience will have already run out. I just don't foresee that happening. I really don't believe that's what's going to happen. So 3 years is tough. To answer your question, 3 years is tough.
Yeah.
But I do think Drake Maye will be here. And listen, the way the NFL goes, Justin, if he's the right guy and they're able to give him a couple of extra pieces that really can kind of help him elevate, as he's already, in my opinion, elevating what's around him in this Patriots offense, it's going to make the coaching staff look better. It's going to make the owner look smarter. It's going to get people's, fannies in the seats. Because they're going to be winning games in all likelihood, because it's the most important position in football. And it's paid that way, and it's considered that way for a reason. So if they got it really right with him, and they can hit on a couple of other pieces, they don't have to be home runs, but you got to hit a few doubles and triples this offseason. If you can do that, then it could save everybody's job, and we could be looking at a very similar picture 3 years from now.
Yeah, well, whether it's a train wreck or not, it's going to be fun to watch. This is the most interesting 1-6 team that I've ever seen. It hasn't been boring, that's for sure.
Yeah.
All right, Phil. Well, thank you for coming on and doing this. I really appreciate it. Great to actually sit down and talk to you. Hope to have you on again soon.
You're the best, buddy. Thanks for having me. And yeah, let's do it again soon. Appreciate you.